Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Educator Call Snap channel. How you doing? So today we're going to be talking about Evolved She-Hulk Infinaut. So it's a pretty old deck. It's just got a facelift, or it's coming back in the meta due to the magic buffs. Essentially, it's really just revived the whole archetype, and it's been pretty popular, and it also performs pretty well in both conquest and regular regular ranks. So I thought it would be a good time to talk about the deck. I don't think I made a deck breakdown about this before, so it's going to be pretty helpful, pretty useful, since the playstyle is very different than other types of decks. So let's begin. I'm a little tired today. If things are going a little off, didn't get much sleep. But yeah, let's talk. Let's go. So, what is She-Hulk Infinaut or Evolved She-Hulk Infinaut? The deck strategy is to use magic to set up either a She-Hulk Infinaut combo, or with the introduction of High Evolutionary, you can now use Evolved Hulk as well to just make a big, powerful play on turn 7. And the magic buff, moving it from turn 5 to turn 3, has really allowed it to shine, because when it was turn 5, it was such a huge investment that if things went wrong, it went really wrong, and you really couldn't counter or protect the limbo location. Now, it being at 3, there are other things you can do, and it's not as much of an investment to play the magic. If things go well, you can do other plays. So okay, we have like a standard list. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a standard list. This is like maybe the best performing version of this particular list, because it's kind of a niche list because it's running high evolutionary and stuff like that. It's not necessarily the most popular or standard, but I think this list has a lot of things going for it that makes it feel pretty good. So I'm just putting it in here as the standard. So you do have a lot of tech in this deck, so it's not very restrictive in that you can just react to what people are playing, and then there's just like good early game and decent late game options with the She-Hulk plus something. So let's go through the cards one by one, kind of talk about them, why they're in here. So She-Hulk, obviously, She-Hulk Infinaut, those are like core pieces. You you pass on turn 6 most of the time, and then drop the She-Hulk plus the Infinaut or the Evolved Hulk on turn 7. Because it bypassing on turn 6 with the Limber on the field, She-Hulk becomes 0 power, and then you can play the 0 power She-Hulk with a big power swing. And the nice thing about that is usually you're going to be behind on priority, so you don't get to worry about Shang-Chi. I mean, sometimes that can happen, but under normal circumstances, you're not really worrying about Shang-Chi or anything like that, so it's a nice final turn play. Next up, we have Infinaut, same thing. It has the same idea. You can only be played if you pass last turn. Well, She-Hulk is a perfect reason to do that, so you just have this huge power swing on the final turn that's pretty flexible in how you want to play your power, so it can be a very nice final tool. And Evolved Hulk is kind of the same thing. It's an alternative scaling way to play the final turn out. Sometimes you can have the same 20 power if you start off with Hulk in your hand. So it's just another tool. Instead of only having that Infinaut to combo with, now you have Infinaut or you have Evolved Hulk. So there's just more flexibility in that you have things to do in case you don't draw one of your other key pieces. Next up, we have Magic. This is also a key piece. It just creates limbo to consistently get that turn 7. So Magic's been a very interesting card in the game. It used to be super broken, then they nerfed it. This was probably before full release, but then they noticed it hasn't been played too much, and decided to make it back a tier 3 cost card. So I will say this does do a lot for deck building. I would say so many decks have been revitalized because Magic is now turn 3, and it just allows you to just set up these turn 7 combos without too much of a drawback. So definitely definitely a nice addition to the game. I don't know if it's broken or anything like that. I wouldn't necessarily say it's broken or anything, but it does feel like you can reliably play Magic and not worry too much. And having an extra turn in the game is very important. So this does feel pretty impactful, but we'll see if second dinner wants to change it back or adjust it in some way. But for now, feels really good and just a nice core piece. Next up, we have High Evolutionary. So this adds the ability to play the Evolved cards, and we are running a number of them. It's not just Hulk. We are also running Evolved Shocker and Evolved Misty Knight because they kind of help the game plan. So Evolved Shocker is pretty cool because you can hit any of your combo pieces. So I'm talking about things like She-Hulk, Infinaut Hulk, and that just allows you to play the combo on turn 6 without turn 7 without needing the turn 7 limbo play. So Shocker itself just gives you the ability to do the combo without having to rely on that limbo. So it just gives you an alternative way of playing out the game, which is really nice because sometimes people won't expect it. And it can be pretty unassuming just playing the Shocker. It's like, oh, well, I gotta wait for this turn 6 play now. So pretty good alternative way and just a nice card in this deck. And then Misty Knight, I mean, we are running Hulk, so all the end turn cards get an advantage. We're not running Cyclops just because of room, but you could definitely. There are versions with Cyclops in there, but Misty Knight, we are trying to have some good early game, and if you have 2 cards, Misty Knight just buffs and buffs. So it's a nice 1-drop to play if that is the particular game plan, which it is. Nebula as well and Sunspot are both in there as well. These are just really powerful 1-drops, just especially in this particular deck where they can contest lanes by themselves and just apply good pressure in the game without really worrying too much about them. So we have both of them. If you're running She-Hulk, it just makes sense to always consider a Sunspot as well. And then we have the tech cards. So Cosmo, this denies the removal of Limbo. So sometimes people will try to storm the Limbo turn 6. Well, if you go Magic on 5 and then Cosmo on Magic on 3 and then Cosmo on 4, you just deny that. You can also tempo out the Cosmo just to prevent on turn 6 if you think they're going to do it and you want to do it that way. It kind of ruins the combo, but if that's more important, then you could do it. And generally, Cosmo can win games by itself as long as you're hitting the right tools. I've been playing my discard Hela, and a lot of people have been playing Cosmo to me, and it's not a death sentence, but it's annoying. And I'm just like, So Cosmo is pretty good in the meta right now, so if you can run it, it can do some work for you. But generally, it's here to play after the Magic to kind of deny the Storm or the Scarlet Witch angle. And then, of course, we're running armor because we're running a ton of 1s. We don't want to be too vulnerable to the Killmonger, so you can just play the armor afterwards. And it also just messes with destroy decks that are running around sometimes. A lot of people are playing Venom and stuff like that, so you can definitely mess with them as well there. So it's pretty good in that. And then finally, we're also running Leech. And I know I'm not a big fan of the card, but it does work pretty well in this deck because it's good tech into a lot of things people want to be doing on that final turn. A lot of people will be setting up to mess with you with Storm or Killmonger or whatever. And if you leash on 5, right, their turn 6 Storm, Killmonger, none of it works, right? So if you don't have the means or you didn't have the time to play your Cosmo or play whatever, the Leech can just be a secondary way of shutting all of that down. So it's just an annoying card. And no one's really playing it, so no one's really going to expect it, I think. So definitely works here. But yeah, those are the pieces. And they go into different sections. So the first part is like early game units, tempo units. So these cards you just play early for tempo. But you're still focusing on that turn 7 game plan. So these don't really... they're not that important, so you can just play them and expect them not to do much or like get them Killmongered if that's the deck they're playing, if they're playing a destroy deck or something like that. But you could definitely just run these and just play them for tempo. So we have Nebula, Sunspot, Shocker, and Misty Knight. Those are just your early game units. Then you have the combo pieces. So these are usually your win conditions, where it's Sunspot plus something. I mean, She-Hulk plus something else. That's really going to give you the direction to win. So it's not necessarily game over if you don't have these cards, but your games will be significantly harder if you don't have at least two of the combo. Well, She-Hulk plus another tool. So it's basically what the deck is about. So if you don't have them, you're going to be behind. And then tech cards. We've talked about all these cards, but these are just cards to protect your game plan or mess with your opponents. And you don't need them in every game, but some matchups they do a lot of work. So that's Cosmo, Armor, and Leech. And then generally, how you want to pilot it, the main game plan is you play the Magic, then you skip turn 6, and then you play She-Hulk plus something, either Infinaut or Hulk on turn 7. And that's usually your way to win. Everything else isn't that important compared to doing that particular game plan. So usually if your end game is Hulk, it means that you started with Hulk in your hand or you drew it super early, and you want to be focusing on skipping the energy wherever possible. We do have Sunspot, Misty Knight, and She-Hulk, which you could play earlier if it makes sense. You can all take advantage of this particular skipping energy playstyle. Now, your early game is just for tempo or just for pressure, and only really rely on them if you have armor. So sometimes you'll play Nebula. Nebula gets a ton of power, and then you think you won the lane, but then they Killmonger you, and you don't have an answer to that. So just make sure if you are trying to rely on things like Nebula into like a lane that's locked down or something, then just armor it as well. And Cosmo is just to be played after the Magic so that you prevent Limo from being removed. But you can also use Cosmo in general Cosmo ways, right? It's a good card generically. So you don't really want to play High Evolutionary. It's just there for just to let you play the other cards. Its stats aren't particularly good. But if you have to, you don't have a way, you don't have like a Sunspot or anything to take the mana, then you can do it. But it's not premium. And then Leech is just very strong to the Night counterplays for turn 6 and 7. So sometimes people will be setting up to Killmonger you on 6 or something, or 7 even. And the Leech just says, nah, not today. It also messes a ton of other decks as well. Like a lot of decks, are not happy to see a Leech. So it's a pretty good card right now. So in optimal settings, right, you're playing some early games, so something like Sunspot, Armor into Magic on 3, then you go Cosmo on 4, Leech on 5, and then you pass on 6, and you go She-Hulk with a 6-drop on 7. So that's usually the full game plan if things are going perfectly, but obviously you have to react to what your opponent does. But that's the idea there. And then some of the powerful plays, right, She-Hulk plus Hulk, that can be a big setup. Same thing, Sunspot plus She-Hulk plus Infinaut, right? That can be, those are your main win conditions in terms of how you want things to go. And then just your early game can also just provide pressure if you're going like Misty Knight, Sunspot, Nebula, Armor, right? Those Sunspot, Nebula, Armor could win a lane, or Misty Knight, Sunspot, Armor can win a lane. It is quite a lot of power for a little investment. You're spending 4 mana. And you're getting lots and lots of power in this deck, so pretty powerful set of things to do. But the main win condition is Sunspot plus something else. I mean She-Hulk plus something else. And in terms of flex spots, you don't really need the Cosmo or the Leech, but I think it makes a lot of sense in this deck. So I don't even know if I'd put flex, but it's not necessary. And then High Evolutionary is more of a tech addition here. I think it makes a lot of sense in this deck, but there's definitely, this deck comes from the original version of this deck did not have High Evolutionary, so you don't need the High Evolutionary. It still works without it. It's just like the new updated version, I would say. You just High Evolutionary, and it makes sense. It's pretty reliable. So in terms of the cheap units, you can definitely run some of the other evolved cards like Wasp and Cyclops. The more expensive ones are a little bit less reliable, since like if you're trying to play Abomination, you want to skip turn 6. So it becomes hard when you play it. And then you can just have other early game units like Jeff, Titania, Psylocke, Goose, Iceman. So Psylocke is kind of like Magic in terms of you play it on 4, you skip turn 5, but you have 6 mana there, and then you get the zero mana She-Hulk and then the Infinaut. So that's the reason why it's a suggestion. And then in terms of like big cards, there isn't a lot of like big cards to use, but you do have control tools that you can work with. So Moongrow can be pretty nice. That's what it originally was, where you'd Moongrow and go double She-Hulk. But people are adjusting, and it's still something you can do. Chavez for consistency if you want to do it that way. And then you could go Shuri, Taskmaster, or something else. If you're playing She-Hulk, Shuri into pass into She-Hulk is not that bad. And since the magic is there, you can still kind of do the combo anyways. Like, you're not really suffering. Before, if you tried to do Shuri, you'd go Shuri into magic, which was like not helping you, right? So this allows you to do it without really suffering too badly. And then you can just go some other early game. Echo is a tech card. I don't really like Echo right now. I do think it might get better, but right now I don't love it. And Professor X is another tech tool if you want to do it that way. It also protects your limbo lane, and also just gives you that lockdown to protect you from Killmonger. So if you want to run Armor and Professor X just to protect your 1-drops, that's something you can do. So those are definitely some options here. And in terms of core card alternatives, you need Magic, you need She-Hulk. You don't need High Evolutionary. But I will say the deck becomes different if you don't have High Evolutionary. At least this version of the deck becomes different. Just because High Evolutionary just lets you fully commit, because you get the Shocker, you get the Hulk, and you get more early game with the Misty Knight. So you get to fully commit to the game plan. If you don't have High Evolutionary, you kind of need to win through a different method. Either that's like locking down a lane or storming a lane, or just going with Moongrow and double She-Hulk or something like that. So it becomes a different deck if you don't have High Evolutionary. So you have to be aware of that. But it's not necessary. It's not core, where Magic and She-Hulk, you need those if you want to play a deck of this type. Now, in terms of when to snap, there isn't that many like obvious snap situations for this deck. I would say the most obvious one is if you have Magic plus the She-Hulk combo, but I think that one's pretty readily available. Like, you'll know that you're in a powerful position if you've got the Magic and then you have the combo in your hand. It's pretty telegraphed. Like, yeah, you're about to do something crazy. And then the other way, if you want to snap, is in tech counter. So usually if you're playing Leech and you think it's good, you want to snap before you play the Leech. Same thing with Cosmo. If you think they're going to lose to a Cosmo, you want to snap before that comes down. Same thing with Armor, right? If they're going to lose to an Armor, you want to snap before it comes down. So those are some of the obvious ways. But other than that, there isn't like, oh, in this situation or that situation, it just makes sense to snap. This one, you do have to watch the game and see what's going on. Since your deck is pretty combo reliant, it's not going to be like, oh yeah, this draw you're going to just auto win. And what are some of the weaknesses? Obviously, losing your Limbo could be devastating. So you just have to make sure your Storm, like they don't Storm or Scarlet Witch you. You do have ways around it, right? With the Cosmo and the Leech, they both work well in that. And then another issue is like the low power ceiling. Even though the deck has a lot of power, it's not necessarily tons of power or more power than maybe a bounce deck or a discard deck or anything like that. So you do have to be careful where you're playing your cards. And then Killmonger as well, since you're rolling a ton at once. If you don't have any protection for that, could also be a problem. And then Shang-Chi with priority. So usually with this deck, you don't have priority, but there are other decks that kind of play in a similar fashion. So you could definitely be behind on priority. And if that happens, then you just have to be careful with the Shang-Chi, right? Because they should know what you're doing. And usually you're going to be, the Shang-Chi will hit something. Because your She-Hulk can get hit, and your Infinaut and your Hulk can also get hit. So it's not like if they Shang-Chi you, it's gonna miss, right? Like as long as they play into a lane that you're gonna play as well, then it's gonna work. So you do have to be careful about that. Now let's talk about some of the example builds here. So first example build is just another high evolutionary version, but you're leading more high evolutionary. You have the Cyclops, you have the Abomination. So it's just a little bit more heavy on there. You don't have the Hulk instead, but you're using Abomination as the combo. So what's going on here is you're trying to get the Abomination cheap enough where you can go something like double Abomination, double She-Hulk. Like that's the dream, right? If you don't get the Infinaut setup. So it's just a different type of, like, different version of this deck where you're, instead of going for Hulk as your final, you're going for like Moongrow double Abomination as your final. So it kind of works in the same way. There's less tech tools, which is notable, but it's still the similar game plan, just a different execution. Next up, this one is also running the Moongrow, but instead you do have Cyclops and Quinjet. So it's a little bit more willing to flood, essentially. So you can go Quinjet, Moongrow, and then start flooding with your combos. And still the She-Hulk, the double She-Hulk is in there. So it's definitely more of a flood specialist, but you still have that Cyclops. You still have the ability to pass, gain stats. There's no Nebula here, but you do have Jeff. So this one's more of a, I was gonna say a vibe. This one's more of like I want to just play stuff, compared to the passing centric version that we are really highlighting in this guide. So this one, the next couple don't have high evolutionary, right? Because I think I want to have some examples that don't run high evolutionary. So this one is maybe more Shuri focused, where you have the ability to go magic into Shuri, into pass into She-Hulk, and combo with Taskmaster. So there's definitely some value here. You can also go Shuri into Infinaut if you want to do that as well. I mean, I don't know if you need 40 power in a lane, but you could do it. And then you have Psylocke as the alternative way of getting it down if you don't hit the magic. So just a different line, but this one doesn't run the high evolutionary cards, which some people won't have. And the next one here, this one isn't Shuri focused. This one's more control-y. So now you're running Storm, and that allows you to do a lot of other little things. So you can go Storm into Jones or Storm into Jubilee and try to win that way. So there is the chance of pulling your Infinaut, which might change your plans, but you do have the Kitty Pryde with Angela combo to just start generating power. So you could do something like Angela, Kitty Pryde, and then Storm follow up to just try to lock down that lane. So there's definitely some work there. And it's just more options for people that don't have high evolutionary. Maybe one of these will resonate with you instead, and you try it and see if you like it. And then the last one here, this one's a little bit more memey, I guess, because it has an Orca in there. Not saying the Orca is bad, but it is notable that it's in there. Just because it's another big card. So it's just trying to replace high evolutionary in a similar style, just not having the high evolutionary card. So Orca is like pretty decent to play, 16 power base. So you're just trying to do the same thing, but instead of having high evolutionary, you have the Orca, and you have the Storm Juggernaut just to have another way of winning the lane. So you go Storm Juggernaut, and then you pass on 5, or, well, usually you'd play Magic. You either go Magic or Storm, and then if you play the Storm, then you'd pass and go for the Orca line. So those are some of the ideas there. I haven't tested this one, so I'm not saying I'm tested all of them, but I haven't tested this one either. So let me know if this one works, right? It looks interesting to me, but that's the idea here for this deck. It's a pretty good deck, I would say. It's doing really well in the meta, so definitely try it and see. And hope you guys enjoy this one. Hope my brain not working was okay. I could definitely notice sometimes where my brain turned off for half a second and I have to recover. But anyways, thank you for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Make sure you like, subscribe, and follow, or not. And have a wonderful rest of your day.
Educated calling snap. Once you watch him, you won't go back. He'll teach you to marvel snap. Your skills will be improving. How you do